So then the file we want to open to begin the imports and the massing stuff is open project, and it's going to be under imports for geometry, and it's this session 02 import example. So this is actually handling two things. It's handling one, the parametric box we're going to build, as well as the import from Rhino, to kind of give you a feel on why we're doing this way, and kind of the potential of things you can do. So you'll see that these boxes are kind of what we're going to start with first. So I always try and go forwards and backwards with things, so that way there's no question on why we're doing it, right? So this is a family, and each one of these boxes is its own specific family, okay? Or I mean, it's all the same family, so each one of these is just a type. So if I wanted to switch this one out, I've created my own box that's allowing me to change each one of these. So in this case, this is box B, right? Goes to box B. So all of those parameters live in the same global parametric box family that I've created. And there's a bunch of logic embedded into it that I'm calculating, right? I'm driving everything from what material it is. The width is driving the length, and it's also driving the height of that object, and it's reporting back to me square footage within that box. So we'll build that out for that. And so that family, right, is just, I'm not building the family inside the project. So now comes the really confusing part of Revit for a lot of people, is that the project is a master file container for a bunch of families, and then you're assembling all of these families together inside that project file, right? Rarely are you building content directly in the Revit file, other than your system families, your walls, your floors, your doors, and things like that. Everything else is really done at the family editor level. You're bringing it in, and then you're editing the parameters within that. Some other things you can do with that, right? So within this mass, right? So this is a mass. I can also do it as a generic model. We'll talk about different family types, right? I'm cutting mass floors. So if I had irregular geometry, right? I would use, like the Folsom project, we did the mass of that first, and then we cut the floor plates from that, because trying to trace out every floor plate is pretty tedious. You've already done it. You don't want to do it again. Let Revit generate those for you. So in this case, you can see that I'm cutting my floor plates as well from whatever that decides to be. And as I change that, it's dynamically changing that floor plate, right? Also, right, this is from Rhino, right? So I can't build this surface in Revit. There's absolutely no possible way for me to build this surface in Revit unless I script it out. The thing with this is, and this kind of broad brush through, it's not just windows, it's not just doors, it's not just decks that I'm building as families. It's really, in architectural terms, I'm building form, and I'm building up form as this hosting element. So something like this, right, on this mass, if I edit this family, I'm down to the granular level. So inside the massing folder, if I was going to go and open up this file, this same family lives also right here, right? It's the same file. They are not connected though. Once you bring in a family into a Revit project, it is belonging to that Revit project. So if I have a series or a library of items inside the office here, and I'm pulling from them, I don't have to worry about saving them out unless I want that change that I've made available to everybody, and a lot of times you don't want to do that. You'll also want to make sure that just be aware that connection is there. Don't assume that when I make a change that it's going to populate back to the original file itself. So these two are two separate files. I could go ahead and open this file, and it would be separate from the one I currently have open. Even though they're the same, they see each other as being different.
Why is it designed that way, unlike something like Max, where you can edit a file?
It's designed that way. It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, unless you talk to Autodesk. Really, my take on why that's advantageous is that I don't have to worry about, this file can exist on any workstation, right? So this idea of work sharing, Even with a Revit material, something as simple as a texture, right? Revit out of the box puts all the textures onto your workstation. And that's really kind of counterintuitive to the way most people do rendering, where they centralize everything to reduce the load on the computer. Or Revit, in order to handle it so everybody can collaboratively work, and even across offices, is that they handle the idea of the material down to the singular user workstation level. So that's kind of what the family's doing too. Once the family's embedded into the project, it lives with the project and it's feeding off the project. They intertwine.
I guess because the model is centralized, you don't need like to separate.
Well, and even so, if you did separate them, then you're going to have to create central files out of your families as well.
Right.
And that's not something, that's just too much. You know, families are the basis of all what Revit is. You know, everything, it's a container of data, and it has a certain category of data that it corresponds itself with. So that's really why I think, if that answer is kind of more of a democratic answer for you, but that's all I really got. I mean, there's no real answer. I mean, to me, I'd still, and it's really so, even then, when I edit the family inside the project, right, we can make new types of this family, right? I can make new boxes. So this is a box family. Inside this box, right, now I'm at the family level now. When I look at the properties, right, I have my 3 types that I created. I created these types explicitly in this family, right? And this is what I would save on the server. But I'm allowed the benefit, and this is another reason probably why, to answer your question. When I look at this, I can still, inside the project, I've set up the conditions to make this thing parametric. So I can put together 10,000 different iterations of this type and still have the family only live with those 3 types, right? So I'm really developing logic that then I can change inside the Revit project. You certainly wouldn't want certain conditions in every project, right? I wouldn't want 10,000 doors inside every one of my projects. I would want to start with my base door that I can then begin developing content off of. And for instance, and for example, here's my box, right? Box A, B, and C. If I right click and I do a new type, right? I can do a new type called Craig's Box. And then Craig's Box I can drag in. Oops. Lost my type properties. Craig's Box I can drag in, right? It's entirely different than the other ones. It adopts a certain set of principles, and I can independently change those from the other ones. So I can say that this one now is, 20 feet or something like that. I apply, and it's going to change that box's relationship, and it creates a new typology within my family library. If I go back and I take this and I edit this family now, right, which it should be here, and if I look at the type properties, I'm still left with only box A, B, and C. It's not populating even back to the family at that level, right? So, and to explain the technical side of it, I don't think you really need to, even I don't understand why it's like that.
So when you edit the family here, it doesn't edit the actual family file. It only edits the family within the Revit project.
It does and it doesn't. So let's say in here I create a new family type called type, we'll leave it as type 4. And then type 4 is 65 feet, right? Drives everything else, and I apply. I see that change there. Now when I load it back into the project, so I'm always editing it and then going in and kind of like in CAD, I'm closing out the block editor, I'm loading it back in. So I'm loading it back into this file, right? I always have to make that statement to Revit and say, I want you to load. And then it's going to say, hey, you already have this file, right? You've already loaded this in. Do you want to overwrite your existing version? Well, of course, that's why I'm bringing it back in. Okay, well, if you do want to do that, then do you want to overwrite the existing version and any new parameters that you've assigned to it? Right, so if I've gone in and changed box A, box B, and box C from that initial, it's going to reset that back, right? So it's kind of a reset function at that standpoint. Or I can just say overwrite existing version, right? And it doesn't reset these values that I've created, and it doesn't reset this value that I've created. It still reads that original type, but now when I look at parametric box, I see type 4 in addition to my type, right? So it's a twofold process. I can go in and put in types, and I can do other The only difference is it will never go backwards. You can, any type you make in Revit will never populate back to that family unless you completely export that family out and resave over it.
Yeah.